Hi everyone, I bet you didn't know you could have so much fun with a dog's ball and some radius arms. Watch this. Get it, Jess. You get that ball. You get that ball, Jess. What is it? Oops, she's at the camera. What is it about little minds and stuff? Hello guys, here we are, back on it. So sat in the Mustang here, and very, very comfy, very, very nice little car. Not so little, but anyway. So today we're going to make a crack on the diffs, and I've got the diff casings out on the bench, and for you guys that don't have the luxury of an engine building room, a bodywork room, a grinding room and everything, you're just working out of one garage like I am, then I've got a little tip for you so that you can do everything in the garage you want to do without having to you know, be really mega clean between operations, because as you all know, when we're doing these restorations, it's sandblasting one day, next day is going to be painting, and then you're going to be building an engine or something. So you need to be able to switch between the 2, 3, 4, whatever things you're doing, and not worry too much about contamination. So let's get to the bench and I'll give you a little tip about what I've done, and it involves beer. Okay, so as you can see here, we've got a bench that I've been using for sandblasting, spraying, grinding, all sorts of stuff, and there's contamination everywhere. So what I do, if I want to work on something small like this, and I want to get back to getting those bushes out of those arms and everything, and then painting again, I don't want to be having to scrub the bench and clean every nook and cranny and make sure everything's perfectly clear. So I keep these beer cartons. When you buy your cans of beer in your supermarket, you get these boxes, and what I do is I save them. I don't put them outside, I leave them indoors so they don't get damp. And then when you need one, just cut one open it up, cut the front edge off so you get rid of all this. You see back here, you get these flappy ends. Just cut that off and you can work on this, and you know that you've got a perfectly clean surface to work from. Now what we're doing here is not particularly clean. I was going to be coming out and starting to build them, but the first thing we need to do is make sure they're clean. There's no paint on the edges, there's no burrs, we've got no swarf and everything, because believe me, pretty much every tapped hole, like you've got these tapped holes in here for the bolts, pretty much every tapped hole on the gearbox, well, not the gearbox so much actually, to be honest, but certainly the engine, definitely the engine and the diffs and everything, the bottoms of the holes are just full of swarf. And I think the designers have actually taken out a cleaning operation. And what they do is they draw the hole deeper, so you've got your core hole, and then you tap it, and then when you tap it, the swarf goes to the bottom of the hole, and they just wind the bolt in and leave the swarf in there. Certainly the worst of all is the engine. The engine's a disgrace. Every single bolt hole, I won't say pretty much every single bolt hole in the engine was full of swarf at the bottom. It's disgusting. And also they don't bother deburring anything. There's sharp edges everywhere. So in this little video, we're going to start off by looking at getting it all cleaned up, removing the burrs, cleaning up the edges, making sure we've got no paint. And then before we do anything, if we need to paint anything, now I know I've got some paint missing from this edge here, which is going to rust. So what I'm going to do is actually clean everything up, and then after I've cleaned them, I'm going to brush paint them. And so let's get going with the first part of the operation, and then we'll go from there. Right, so first things first, identification. We have to know when we're rebuilding these diffs, we need to know which was the front and which was the rear. And if you remember, I've got my book here, which is a godsend, and this book actually tells me everything I need to know, because I wrote down everything. You can see in here we've got all the bolt lengths and diameters written down, new parts required and everything. And then you can see down here I've got diff 2.1 is rear, diff 2.2 is front. So I looked all over the diff casings, and there are marks on here of date. Now both of mine were made 21st of 2nd 11, so that's no good. Then we've got another mark down here, 420-12, and they're both the same. But above there, we've got a 2.2 on this one and a 2.1 on this one. So you can see what I've written down here is we've got diff 2.1 is rear, 2.2 is front. And then all the parts that have come out of these diffs have all gone in a box, which is marked front and rear. All the bearings are handed. I know which side everything goes on. Everything is punched, as you know, one punch for left, 2 punches for right, or whatever. And then on the rear, I've actually used the number 1 and the number 2. So I can not only identify which parts go on which side, but I can identify whether they come from the front or the rear axle. So that's been my coding system all the way through. and writing everything down is crucial, especially if you're going to be a few months between. You know, if you're taking a diff apart today and rebuilding it, then put all the parts to one side, rebuild it, fine. But if you're doing like I'm doing this, these were probably stripped, I don't know, last summer, and they're, you know, this is a good 6 months later. So there we go. So that's the first thing. The other thing we need to do is make sure these things are clean. Now, I've just had a very quick look at them, and they're going to need another wash. These have been sandblasted and primed and everything, and they have been cleaned out and washed out, but I've noticed there is still some residue of sand, or grit should I say, in the actual oil transfer ports in here. If you can see in there, are you on camera? Yeah, down in here we've got oil transfer ports. So if I shine the light on there, it should make it a lot easier for you to see. And there's sand down in those. Now I'm not going to get the pressure washer out just for these, so what I will do, I will get a lid off a plastic box, put the lid in the bottom of the shower, and I will actually wash these out in the shower with hot water and the shower. So I'll do that later on, but before I do that, I need to make sure everything's clean and we've deburred everything. Now all of these edges are all sharp, they're not deburred. There's dents around the edges of these holes, which are probably what I've done. These edges here are sharp. All the edges of these drilled holes are not deburred. Nothing is deburred, everything is sharp. You need to it's just a bit of added touch, just a bit of professionalism. Take all the edges off, clean everything up, make sure there's no paint anywhere. And the tools I use for that are diamond files. You can get these in any pound shop. They're absolutely brilliant. I find these to be better than the professional ones I've owned in the past. They're absolutely awesome. One of these scrapers, again pound shop, and these actually hold a standard, if I can get it out, a standard single edge, I can't get it out, but it holds an ordinary single edge razor blade in there, and they're really, really good little tools. And then a wire brush, okay, preferably a warm one because it's softer. It doesn't have the aggressiveness of a new wire brush. It's going to, you know, gouge up the surface. And then a bit of Scotch-Brite, and that's it. So what we're going to do first of all is just go around all the edges and just lightly, just clean them up. You don't need to be, you're not looking at filing new shapes. You just want to deburr them. Okay, and then the edges you can go around. I've got half round here, so we can just go around here and just clean up all these, and literally just almost rubbing it just to get it off. Same on these drilled holes. You can use a drill or whatever. I've got a deburring tool I've used on them. But just basically just taking away the corners, taking away the edges, and you really should be able to rub your fingers around there and not cut yourself on anything. Also make sure these threads are spotless. And obviously once this all washed and everything, that'll get another inspection. So that one can go to one side. So this one here, we're going to take the masking tape out. Now I put masking tape in here. When I sandblasted them, if you remember, I put a aluminium bung in there which I turned to protect the bearing face, so I didn't sandblast the bearing face. And then this area here is doing nothing, and then this area here is where the seal goes. And if you'll notice, I've got red primer in there, and there's a reason for that. If you remember, my rear axle was leaking, and I think the reason it was leaking wasn't because the seal went, it's because all this area here wasn't painted, and water got in there, and it corroded really badly pitted, and it corroded behind the seal. So between the seal and the axle it all corroded, and it compressed the seal and made the seal go uneven, and hence it leaked. And I think there was also oil leaking out from the other side through the rust, because the rust was also oily. So I've primed that in there so it doesn't happen again, and then when we put the seal in, I'll probably put some Hylamar or something around there, just kind of seal this area in, so that if water does get in there, well, to stop the water getting in there basically. It's worth checking on yours. If you have got a leaky diff pinion, if you take it to a garage just to have a new seal fitted, you're wasting your time if you just press a new seal on top of the rust, because it's just going to go again. So that's my little tip for today. So the masking tape's out, so all that's all good. And then we're going to turn it over, look in the back face, and again I can see less of it, but there is some deposits of sand in there, so we're going to get rid of that. So first thing we're going to do is get rid of this paint, so we can either scrape it like so with a scraper. I should be going towards my hand, I know, but I am. Or wire brush, and just wire brush, get rid of the primer in these mating faces. It doesn't have to be spotlessly clean, it's not critical. I mean, I've got paint on the axle faces where this joint goes, and I've done that purely because that's what Andrew did, whoever built the axles did. So You just go around here again on the bearing surfaces, just wire brush them off. Like I say, it's a worn wire brush, so it's not going to be gouging anything up or scraping anything or removing any material. It's literally just cleaning the surface, and that's all we're trying to do. Okay, so I'll get that done and then I'll come back. Hello guys, bush time. Time to get these bushes out because I want to fit Super Pro polyurethane bushes. There's nothing wrong with my rubber bushes at all, so you're all going to say you're crazy, but I just want to be able to change them easily in future, and then the older they get, the worse, the harder they're going to get out, I think. So I'm going to change them for the Super Pro bushes, and we'll go all through that and how we do it and everything. So I've had them on the press, and I managed to get one out. You can see there, but the others are just not going to budge. They'd rather roll over and sort of than move. So we can see already there's corrosion in there. So what I did, I made up this tool here, and it's actually knackered now. But basically it's a piece of tubing, it's a piece of seamless tubing, cut just about 80mm long. And what I did was stuck it up in the lathe, and I turned an angle on the inside so that it became a cutter, and then just put it on top, just like so, and then just press it down through and cut the centre of the bush out, as you can see there. So what you're left up with then is this. So you've got a bit of rubber. So what I'm doing now is scrape around there now, clean it up a bit, and I'm going to try and weld inside here, do a weld down the inside of that tube, and hopefully that will shrink it. As it cools, it should shrink it, and then I'll be able to press them out. I don't really like the idea of sawing, because we can see we've got one here. You can saw away, but if you put a nick in the actual arm itself, it's going to cut into the Super Pro bush. So I'm going to have a go at welding them up and pressing them out. Let's see how I get on. Well, I'm pleased to say that works. As you can see, if you look inside there, it's not the neatest weld in the world, but when you weld it with rubber in the way, it's as good as you're going to get. But yeah, I just welded it, put a couple of runs down there, let it cool, and they came out a treat. There's the other one there. That one's got 3 runs there. Where are we? That one's got 3 weld runs in it. So yeah, happy with that. Now then, I've done the other one. It's here in the vise. There it is. And that's just got the one big fat run of weld in it. So I'm going to put it on the press now. Take you with me, and I'll bet it doesn't work on camera. Let's see. Right, here we go then. Let's get this on here. Get the little tool I made on there. Just get that centered up if I can. Get it under there. I'll make sure it's not going to snag. Can't get that in there, can I? Let's just see if this works. If it works, it'll go bang. Any of you that have done this, any of you that have ever done this before, you know what a swine of a job this is getting these out. Let's see how it goes. Now, nope, it don't want to know it. Right, let's give this another go. Let's add another run of weld in. I've let it cool down. So we'll put the press in there. So let's see if this works. Like I say, we're listening for a bang. There we go. Gone. You can see just how tight these things are. Just come away. Okay, so onto these A-frame bushings, and these come out a lot easier. I've done one. You can see them there. They've got quite a few steps in them, and there's like a double. There's like a steel tube there, and then another tube there, and then actual main pressed in tube itself. So I've turned up this press, this little tool here, and that's designed to sort of go over it, so it pushes over like so, and it kind of locates itself on there, as you can see. So the first one came out like a doddle, so just to make this one not come out, I'll put the camera on the press and we'll see it not come out. Okay, so here goes. Let's watch this not come out. Let's not listen for a bang, because it won't make a bang, because it won't come out with it, because the camera's on. So let's see how we go. Just press down on there. Get the pressure on. Just like I said. There we go. It did come out. So that's that one pressed out. Just like that. All nice and shiny inside. And of course the other benefit with using this like this is I've now got a pair of bushes for the A-frame that are genuine Land Rover, and they're like new. So I'll save those in case I ever get another one and need to change the bushes for standard ones. But that little tools work brilliant. So happy with that. Right, panhard rod and trailing arms. Right, so time to look at cleaning these up. Now I can't remember who it was. I think it was, is his name Chris from Trailer Fitters Toolbox? Said don't try and get away with using a battery drill. It's obvious to me, but many people won't realise it. Battery drills don't tend to go fast enough, and they don't have the boof behind it that you know, your 240 volt normal power drill does. So it's a good idea to use a good old power tool. And if you are in the UK, these tools from B&Q, they keep changing their name, but I mean, I've got a grinder down here. This came from B&Q, and it was probably about £12, and when they were called Performance Power. Okay, there we go, NPT 1154. This thing has seen a hell of a life. It's done all sorts, wire brushing, grinding, cutting, everything, and it must be 30 years old, I'm thinking, 25, 30 years old, going strong. I've been through DeWalt's, Bosch, everything, and this one's still going strong. So I recommend those tools to anyone, these Bosch tools. Not Bosch tools, the B&Q tools. What I don't recommend is modern DeWalt. I don't think they're any good at all. So for doing this, I'm going to use, first of all, a 60 grit flat wheel. This is just a little flat wheel to go in there. And then I'm going to follow up with this, which is a combination of flat wheel and Scotch-Brite. And this one's quite worn out because when they're new, like this, they're too big. So I'm going to have to use a worn one. And then finish off with a Scotch-Brite wheel just to clean it up. Whether I need to paint it in there or not, I don't know. I might give it a coat of Carter's primer and just leave it at that. So stupid really, I've done all this, primed them, painted them, everything, and now I need to paint them again. So because I'm scratching them up, should have done this before, shouldn't I? Never mind. So anyway, let's get this done. So I'll get this in the drill. As ever, prepared. Here we go. And we'll put the power on. Make sure we're in the right way. Yep, we're in 2. So let's just get in there. And that will have just got the worst of the corrosion and any cutting marks or anything, or any marks that are left from pressing the bushes out. So that's that done. So now we can go in with the flat wheel. Just concentrate on the edges to make sure we get a nice shaft. and then we'll go in with the Scotch-Brite just to give it a final. And there we go, as you can see, we look inside there now, they're all nice and clean and shiny. And we need to make sure the edges are nice and smooth as well, otherwise you'll cut into our new bushes. So I'll turn them round now and shout for the back sides. And there we go, all done. I did decide in the end to press these bushes out of these trailing arms because I'm going to be using them before I give it a lift anyway, so I thought I just may as well press them out there. I should imagine they're pretty worthless second hand anyway. But there we go, all polished, all the bores are polished out, and then quick coat primer and then some gloss over the top. So let those dry overnight now, and they should be good to go. It's a little bit warmer now, so hopefully they'll dry in less than 24 hours. But I must admit, these trailing arms here, they were sprayed, what, probably 10 days ago. Now they've had 2 coats and they've had 48 hours between coats, and I put them today in the vise over here. The vise had aluminium jaws in it and was wrapped in a rag, and it still marked the paint. So, you know, this stuff doesn't like the cold weather. It takes forever to go off. But there we go, and they've been indoors for 8 days, I should imagine, 7 days. So yeah, it's Jess over there playing with a bally. And there's the axle, you can see the axle over there, all looking lovely, after about 27 times trying to paint it and get a finish. Anyway, there we go. So call that a day for this one. I'll see you all tomorrow, I guess, maybe the day after, with some diff action. Bye for now. Right then guys, did I mention this video was going to be bitty? It's bitty. It's all sort of backwards and forwards and doing this, that and the other. And so you've seen me look at starting the diffs, and then I found they need to be cleaned out some more, so that's all done now. This is now like 2 days later. I've done some work on the prop shafts in between, and we've also done some work with the bushes that you've already just seen. So let's get back to this diff. I've got all the parts laid out on the bench, all nice and clean and everything, ready to go back together. But I do have a bit of a story to tell, which is very nice for me, and will be nice for you in some forthcoming videos. So let's get to the bench. We'll have a look at what tools we're going to need, what we're going to do, what I've made, and blah 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 blah. Lots of waffle, lots of bullshit, and let's go from there. Okay, so here we are at the bench, and as we can see, we've got all the parts laid out, everything we're going to need to put this axle back together. That is everything we need except for measuring pinion height and stuff. Although I've got a couple of bits and pieces here I'll show you. So starting off with the actual parts of the diff itself, we've got our differential with our crown wheel and bearings already fitted. We've got our pinion here, and on here we've got our bearings already fitted. I haven't removed them, I'm going to reuse them. We've got the drive on there, the flange, which is all nicely painted and everything, so that's all good. We've got our bolts, which are going to hold everything together. Bearing caps for the actual diff. We've got the bearing caps here for the sides and the side bearings. Okay. Now, if you see there's cable ties on here, these are all cable tied together. And what I've done, if you remember when I stripped it down, I've marked everything, so you can see on here there are 2 indentations. So that will show up with the 2 indentations that are marked on here and on here. So make sure it goes back in that side. The main thing is when you put these back together, if you're reusing anything, it all needs to be going back in exactly the same place. Okay. You don't want to be swapping bearings around and from side to side and stuff like that, because it's all going to go through its bedding in procedure again. So it's going to have double the wear. And then we've got the actual diff casing itself. Now going around here we've got some special bits and pieces. I've made this ring up. This is to press the main seal in, the pinion seal, and then there's some other bits of aluminium and stuff here. This is a tool I've made up for putting these in. So it's basically got 3 Allen bolts on it, so I can do this and wind it in, and there we go. And that'll be for winding them in and out, which is dead handy. So that's that, and then we've got here, this is a tool, another tool I've made. This is for holding the flange. So when it comes to tightening up the bolt in the pulley, then we can actually just move that slightly apart. We can put that in there and move it again. Too far, but you get the idea. That goes in there and that holds it solid before I want to do the bolt up. So that's that. Then we've got a torque wrench here. We all know what a torque wrench is. As far as I can see, we only need 2 sockets for this. That's a 15 and an 18mm socket, and they're both 1/2 inch drive to go with the torque wrench. Now for measuring stuff, for shims and stuff, you need a micrometer for measuring shims. I've got a depth gauge here, which is for measuring our depths down in the pinions. I need to use known size blocks because my depth gauge isn't big enough, but you could get a bigger one. We've got a vernier here, or not a vernier, a digital caliper. You can use these, but the problem is when you're using these for measuring depths, they tend to be a bit rocky and they tend to be not very good for that sort of thing. So you know, with this going back together as it was, and I've got all the original dimensions written down, I'll pick up the camera now and show you on the front of my cupboard up here. You can see I write all over the cupboard, but basically up here I've got the front diff and the rear diff, and these are all the dimensions that I measured when it came apart. So if I put it back the same as it was, then I know I'm in the ballpark. Obviously we're going to be checking everything. So consumables, I've got some GL4 oil here. Now I know the diff should be GL5, and I have got GL5 oil as well, but I'm going to be fitting some different diffs into this into these final drives, and I'm not sure if they only take GL4 oil. So rather than contaminate anything at all, if I just use GL4 just a tiny bit to lubricate the bearings as we assemble it, then we know we're okay. And obviously because I'm changing the diffs, I'm going to be assembling this now just to check everything's okay, and then later I'll be stripping it again to put the final diffs in. I'm literally doing that just because I want to get a video out there for you guys and show you how to set the diff up and everything from a good pinion, I hope. Got some thread lock there for our bolts, and in here I've got a tub of aluminium oxide, and this is basically the white powder. If you get aluminium corrosion, like aluminium casings or whatever, you got that white all over it, brush it off, save it, and that's what this is. Aluminium oxide. It's basically it's just a powder, as you can see. It looks like something else. You mix that with a drop of oil, you brush that onto your gears, and as you will see, it gives you a fantastic contact patch. Single. A lot of people use engineer's blue. I've got engineer's blue, but I find it too dark. You can't really see very well against the gears, especially if they're not brand new and they're a bit dulled. So that, I think, is everything. And that is basically what you need to put the diff back together. Now, you see people clamping these things in vice. I'm a big tart. I don't want to be damaging the paintwork, so I'm going to try as much as I can just to do it on the bench. And the other thing, as I said before, clean piece of cardboard down, you can't go wrong. So let's get on with just putting this back together, and we're doing a dry build now, so we're not using the pinion seal. We're not going to be lubing everything up properly. We're just literally going to bolt it together and see what our diff pattern is like. Because obviously, once we put the pinion in and we set the height, that's it fixed. We put this in, okay, and we set our gears. Now if we change this diff 10 times, it doesn't matter. As long as we don't change the pinion or the crown wheel, then the actual pattern will never change as long as we set it sideways correctly with these rings. So there we go. Confused? I am. Okay, so I'm not trying to teach anyone how to suck eggs here at all. I'm just passing on some advice that I use and that people may wish to take on board or whatever. Like I said before, I've got my little book. Okay, I'm prepared. Okay, I've got my little book here which has got all my notes in it for all the engine, gearbox, everything in here. So everything there that I need with the information I need to ensure these are put to get back together properly. Now, in that little book, I've got written in there that the rear diff has got E222. Make sure you can see that there. That E222, so I know that's the rear pinion. The actual diff casing itself has got a date on it, 19th of the 3rd, 11. If you can see that, if I can get it in the light. It's actually on there, it says 19th of the 3rd, 11. So I know that's the main rear diff. Okay, and then these, they were all kept together. So everything's been kept together, so I know everything is the rear. It was all put in one box. And then the actual bearings with their shims and everything were all kept on this pinion. And then on this flange, not that it probably matters, but I've actually got on here a 1. And I know that anything that's marked with a 1 or a 2 is rear. Okay, so what I've done, when I started stripping the rear down, I marked everything like on the front with 1 spot for left and 2 spots for right, say. And then on the rear, I've marked a 1 or a 2 for left and right. So I know then, like when I take the bearing spindles, I know which goes on the front and the rear, although they're different anyway. But when it comes to like hubs, the hubs and the and other bits and pieces that are common between the two axles, basically they're marked that way. So I know everything is good. So what we've got here, we've got to press the pinion bearings into the actual diff housing itself. Now, as I say, these pinion bearings are all perfect, so I'm not going to be replacing them. There's no wearing, there's no chipping. I've looked all around for corrosion. What you're looking for is indentations in the surface, any dark marking, any cracking, chipping, anything that looks a bit dodgy. If somebody's been in here before and tried to butcher it off and damage the cage, any damage whatsoever, if you don't see anything, it's absolutely fine. And if it wasn't whining or rumbling or anything, it's fine. You can see on here the bearing surface in there. It's a little bit wavery, which is a bit weird. Maybe the casing is slightly out of round, but we have got a very slight amount of wavery in there. But there's no chipping, there's no scratching. There's nothing more than you'd expect to see after 100 miles. And bear in mind, this thing has done 16,000 miles. So it's a big old bearing, it's not cheap. It's only done 16,000 miles. I'm not going to replace it. We've got the shim here, which goes between the actual housing, the diff housing, and the bearing there. So that's going to push the pinion out towards the crown wheel. So we measure that. And as with a micrometer, the first thing you always do, get some paper, get the micrometer on the paper like so. Okay, just nip it and then wipe it off. And you can see how much dirt there was on those anvils there, that mark there where my thumb is. That just cleans it off. Just make sure the anvils are clean. So we'll put that on there now. And we have got on there 2.12. Yeah, 2.12 millimeters. It's easier with a digital. What you can do with a caliper, just to check, just to over check, 2.10. Problem is with these things, you're never going to get the accuracy with these that you're going to get with a micrometer. So when it comes to measuring shims and stuff, you can't trust these. You need to be getting a micrometer because they're just not repeatable. A vernier caliper, which is what this is, you can get them for all sizes. These are generally reliable for about 4 thousandths per foot. So that's 0.1 per 300 millimeters, say. So it's not very accurate, whereas a micrometer is much, much better than that. So there we go. That's 2.12. So I'm happy with that. And I'm going to write that in my book for the front pinion. So the front axle, I'm surprised I didn't write it in there before. In fact, I did. I've written it up on the board up there. There we go. So I've written 2.12. There we go. I haven't written down for the rear, so I must remember to write it down for the rear. So there we go. I do write things down. So that shim's just going to drop in there, like so. And then with the bearing, that's going to drop in there. But what I'm going to do is to put a very small amount of oil on it, just a tiny drop, just to give it a bit of a fighting chance. Because what you can find when you press bearings in, you be very careful that it doesn't pick up. And the oil on there should just help it just go in and not pick up. So we'll get this over to the... In fact, while I'm here, rather than go back to the forwards twice, here we've got the forward. If you're looking at the rear diff, this is the front, this is the nose of the diff. You've got the smaller bearing there, that's also going to be pressed into the differential. Again, I'm going to reuse it because it's absolutely fine. And then in here you've got another shim, which I will measure the thickness of. And that one is 1.91. Again, double check with here. 1.89 that's saying, so 1.91, so I am going to write that on the board. 1.91. Okay, and if we have got to make adjustments, I know what I need to be ordering. So that one basically sits on there, and then when the bearing goes on here like so, okay, you pull the bearing down, you torque it down, and this is holding the distance between the two bearings apart. So if you like, it's putting in the preload. So once you've set the distance here to get your crown wheel correct, this one here is actually changing the clamping force of the bearing. If I put a thinner shim in there, it wouldn't turn because the bearings are clamped up too tight. If I put a thicker shim in there, it would have loads of play. It's like a wheel bearing, if you like. You're shimming it out so you can torque it up and get the right preload on your bearings. And we know we talked about preload a lot with the transfer box and everything. This isn't so critical because everything's big and beefy. What you're looking for here is a sort of, you want a bit of drag, and there is a figure for it, but it's nigh on impossible to measure, especially for the home mechanic. So what you're after is a bit of drag. That's all you want, and with no play in it. So there we go. We could start putting shim in and measuring how much preload and that we've got, but really there's no figure for it, so we may as well just go for what the manual says and go for feel. So again, I'm going to put a drop of oil on this bearing just to give it a fighting chance going in. And there we go. And if you watch my modelling channel, I'll be doing a video later on there, and my fingernails are going to be dirty, so apologise for that. Oh, this is another thing that's quite important. Nice piece of old cotton rag. Something that's not going to leave loads of fluff. A lot of people use paper towel. You might find with paper towel, you wipe things, as soon as it catches an edge, it leaves bits of paper towel behind. This may leave a thread, but it's a lot more obvious than a little tiny piece of fluff. You know, any lint-free cloth is going to tear on a sharp edge. But basically, there we go. So we're going to get over to the press now and press these two bearings in. Okay, so we've got this in here now. So we've got the bearing. Because I've got a piece of cardboard under here because of a big tart and I don't want to scratch the paint. But there we go. We've got the bearing there. That's got a very, very light coat of oil on there. The shim. Make sure the shim is in there, so that's all good. So we can drop the bearing in. Now it's a bit hard to get it straight first of all because the casting is not sort of chamfered or anything, so it could go in on any old angle. So you need to be careful when you first start pressing it in. And I've got my block going to go in there, the aluminium plate on the top. You can see I'm just using a range of different pieces of material that I've got. I'm going to start by very, very gently pushing it and making sure that it goes straight and doesn't rock. There we go, now it's gone straight. We can just press that in. Just give it a little push at the back, just give it a couple of tons, just to make sure it's nicely seated on that shim. Okay, and then we can come away with the pressure. Take our bits and pieces out, like so, and then we can turn it over and do the other side. Okay, so there's no shims on this bearing. This is the nose bearing. This one just goes straight in, and this one's a lot easier to get in and get square. So just make sure there's no debris or anything in there. I know I've previously cleaned out and everything. So that's just going to drop in there like so, square. Okay, and that's got a nice little lead on it. So that goes in lovely, and then I've got this aluminium plate here which fits perfectly in that bearing. So just going to drop that in. Okay, get it nice and square on there, and then I'm going to put my, no, that's too big. I'm going to put this one in there. Now this is the actual end off of the press, and I wouldn't normally do this, but to get it all in I had to remove it. But I wouldn't normally do anything without the end on there because you stand the chance of damaging that thread. So I'm going to make sure it all stays square. Yep, that's gone in beautifully. Just give it a little couple of tons, as I say, make sure it's down. And then we can come away. Remove that block from there. Remove that plate from inside. And there we go, as you can see. That's in there. Both bearings all nicely done. Okay, so back on the bench. Now we've got our pinion here with the bearing on it, as I already said. So what we're going to do is just give this bearing a very light lube. I don't want to be going mad with it, but I don't want it to go together dry. So I'm just going to put some around here, make sure we get a drop of oil on each bearing all the way around, and then we can put that in there. just give that a spin round like we say. And then this one here, we've got the shim on here, look, we've got the, make sure we don't leave the shim out. And then again, go around, just a drop of oil on each bearing. And then I'm going to slide this over the pinion. Push that up in there. We can hear now that's all nicely in there. Okay, so now we can turn it up on end. Keep our hand on there. Put the flange on. Take the bolt, no thread lock or anything at this point, just all dry. Put the bolt in, like so. And then so I can't hold it, it's too there's a bit of old thread lock still on there, so I can't quite hold it. So I'm going to put my tool in here, that will hold the flange, and then I can get on here and just gently wind this up. If you start to feel anything bind up, stop and check. And then what I'm going to do is just give this a quick, it's not grunched up, it's probably about 50 pounds-feet, but it's just to seat the bearings. And you will notice as I did that, it's tight to start with, but then it loosens up, and what it is, it's just bedding everything in and levelling everything up. Okay, so I'm happy with that. We've got a nice bit of drag on there, which is what I'd expect to see. If anything, it's a touch too tight, but I'd rather it too tight than too loose. Because as I say, it will always bed in. The other thing you can do here is with a soft mallet, just give it a bang. A bang often works wonders on seating things. Okay, so that's in there, so I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to measure the depth and make sure it's the same. Well, I don't really think I need to, because it's going to be the same, because I've got the same parts going in. So I'm just standing that diff on that ring because the head of the bolt sticks out above the flange, so that should make life a lot better. In fact, I'll find a different ring, I think. Okay, so it's time to measure it, and I've done a bit of measuring before I put the camera on, and to be honest, I'm getting a different measurement than I had before. I can only put it down to inaccuracy, and I'm going to show you now. This is the problem with using stuff like this. Okay, now this bar I know is 15 millimeters thick. Okay, so if I zero my caliper here, okay, so you can see what I'm doing, and then I measure it, I get 14.98. Now I know it's 15 mil. If I use a micrometer, okay, it will be dead on 15 mil. He says, having not checked it beforehand, there we go, 15 millimeters, dead on. Okay, so I know that I've got inaccuracy in this thing, which you always get. Okay, now I'm getting 1502, measure it again, 1501, 1497, you can see what I mean, it's all over the place. So using one of these is not good for this kind of thing when you're looking for a couple of thou. Now, I shouldn't be using terminology like that, I'm sorry. A couple of thou, I mean, a couple of thou is 50 microns, which is 0.050 millimeters. So I know it's 15 millimeters thick. So what I can do, if I want to get more accuracy, I can use a vernier, like so. Right, and I can go down on here, and I can measure the depth there. And it is 592. Okay, according to this vernier, it is 592, 591. Okay, I just had to double check that. It is 591. 15 millimeters is actually 0.591. So using that over the side there, I can come along here, okay, and measure down the depth I get, and I'm measuring down to the top, the front face of the gear. And I have got, use my glass here, I have got 3.5, 3.518. Okay, so 3.518 minus 591. 8 minus 1 is 7. 11 minus 9 is 2. 4 minus 5. So 14 minus 5 is 9. 2.927, and I had it written down as 2.920. Now remember, I used this, so this is where the problem is. So I'm happy with that, and as long as I get a similar measurement going across here, I know all is square and good and everything, and I know that everything's clean, I know everything's pressed in properly, I know the bearings are all good, so I'm not really worried about any variance in what I had before. Especially not, you know, a couple of thou. Yeah, now I've got 3.519. So I'm happy with that. Okay, so there we are. That's all good. Whoops. So that's all good. Happy with that. And that's all turning lovely in there. So, right, we know we're good on there. Now, if now we find we get a problem with our pattern when we come to check the diff engagement, then we know we need to be looking at changing the shims. Just want to cover this differential for a second for those of you that are sort of newer to this and less experienced. If you are rebuilding your axle and you've had loads of clunks and everything, you want to be checking not only the actual backlash here, but also the backlash in the Sun and Planet gears. So if you hold one gear solid, so I'm holding this gear down in here, okay, so you've got the Sun gear down in there, I'm holding that one, I'm moving that one, and we're checking, and we've got a little bit of backlash, which is only to be expected, but we shouldn't have loads of play, it shouldn't be all flopping about. Now this is in really good condition, this diff, having done only 16,000 miles and not really seen much of a hard life, so that's in really good condition, and all's good, so we know everything's okay there. I'm not worried about oiling these, because as soon as it gets a dose of oil, then it's going to get lubricated anyway. The other thing is, I'm going to be selling this diff because I'm going to be replacing it with an Ashcroft. So I'm just lightly lubricating those bearings, the same as I did on the others. And I know that this side is, where have I marked it? Okay, this side is 1. Okay, so I need to get my bearing with 1 indentation. So I've got the ring there, which is, you can see the ring has got 1 indentation. I'm going to remove that, I'm going to put this together, and then I'm going to drop it in there. Okay, so that's in there now. So we've got number 1 in this side, which is correct because I've got 1 indentation in it, and this side will have 2 indentations, so I've got number 2 in that side. I'm just going to push those together just to make sure they're kind of seated. And then what we can do is take our bearing ring, and I just want to make sure this thread is nice and clean. I have been handling it to make the tool to drive it around. This is number 2, so that's going to go in that side. So you just drop that in there and that'll sit in those threads. And then give this one a clean. And this is number 1, drop that in there. And that'll sit in those threads. Okay, so this is number 1. Give it a clean. Got the dowels pressed in there, all nice and ready to go on. So just drop that on there. Make sure the dowels are lining up, and then I'm going to give it a very gentle, you don't want to go beating on it, you just want to be very gentle to make sure your threaded ring still turns. Now bearing in mind this is the first time I've ever done this on a Land Rover axle, so we're learning together. I mean, they're all pretty much the same, to be honest. To be honest, I prefer the type of, some diffs go in with shims either side to move it around, which is a lot more positive. The only trouble is, if you haven't got the right shims, you're stuck, you have to stop on all the shims and stuff, but with this one you can adjust the shims in. What I don't like about this is the way you've got these pins here for locking that bearing in place. Now if the correct position and torque is there, I've got to move that ring either way to get the pin to go in. So if I do get that, I'll try swapping the rings over, I think. But either way, I'm not sort of over the moon with it. So we'll do the same on this side. Let's turn it around so you can see what we're doing. Drop that. Oh, I didn't clean it, did I? Give it a clean. Let me drop that in. Making sure the dowels line up. Very gently tapping it so as not to damage anything. Just check that threaded ring still turns. Yep. And then drop these bolts in. Just like so. And that ring's still turning nicely. And then what we've got to do is nip these bolts down. The manual says 10 Newton meters, but I think what they're saying is just kind of nip them down, just to make sure everything's nicely seated. There we go. So happy with that. Bit of backlash in there. That'd be great if it all worked out perfectly, wouldn't it? So now what I'll do is put this diff on its side so that I can actually measure it properly. I need to measure the run out and everything. I'm just going to give these another little tweak. There we go. Now they're tweaks so I can just move things around, and then my tool that I made is going to fit in there like so. That's going to turn with a 19mm spanner that I'm not prepared for. So that tool's going to go in there, like so, and then using a spanner I can turn it and move the bearing around. I can see now why they've done those bolts up too tight. I can see now why they actually put the thing in a vise, because it all wants to fall about and fall over. Just nip them up. There we go. Now I need to get it on its side now and measure the run out. Right, we've got it in the vise, as you can see there. I've got 2 bolts in here. You can see going up into the bottom of the diff. They're actually 3/8 BSF. BSF, those threads. So be careful you don't wind metric bolts or something in there. They're not M10 fine or 3/8 UNF. So now the first thing we need to do is check the run out. Obviously it's the bearings are all pinched up now, and if I check the run out, you can see on that clock it is hardly moving. We've got about half a thou of run out. Maximum you can have here is 3 thou. No, is it run out is 3 thou? Yeah, run out is up to 3 thou, and this one is, when I get the camera in closer, it is nigh on perfect, so really happy with that. So as I say, if anyone wants to buy this diff off me, I'll have 2 of them for sale very soon. 16,000 miles, no hard usage, and as you can see, in really good condition with no chips or anything. Obviously I'll keep keeping the crown wheel, but the actual diff itself I'll be selling. So if anybody wants some, let me know. So next thing to do now is set the backlash. Right, so you can see I've got a different clock on here now. This is a very small mag base with a little, this is what's called a verdict clock or a finger clock. So it's got a finger on it instead of having the plunger. Now these things are great. Okay, these plunger clocks are great. But the trouble is, when you're looking for getting in and you get into tight places, that little, as you can see, that little verdict clock is a lot better. And also these bloody these mag bases are a pain in the ass. They're awful things. And you know, if you're in the market for one of those, look out for the ones which are like a I can't think what they're called now, but they're a floppy arm. You've got one bolt on one hand wheel on the bottom. You do up, and it clamps it all together. Get one of those. But those things are a pain in the ass. You undo the bloody thing and it pulls the mag away and it falls away, and they're just awful. Especially the cheap ones. So you can see that set up there. Okay, so I'll put the camera down now so you can see what I'm doing. And what we're going to do now is set the backlash. And I'm measuring the backlash, and as you can see, let's bring you in. You can see there we've got So that's 7 to 19, so we've got 12 thou of backlash in there, so that's way too much. So what we're going to do is just move these rings around. Now in the manual, I don't really get it. It tells you to tighten this up to 16 pounds-feet or 16 newton meters or something with the other side away. So with one side loose, like so, let's get this tool in there. So with one side loose, what they're saying is you would tighten this side up to 16 newton meters, which I need to get a feel for that, which is, I'm guessing, just to show you for the camera, is about that. And then I guess you would tighten the other side up like that. Well, that's given me 5 thou of backlash, so I guess it does work. But what we're actually after here is 3 to 7 thou of backlash and a bit of preload on the bearings. So we've got, there's 4 thou now, so that's good. Now, what I don't like about building it this way is you can't feel how tight everything is. I mean, it all feels okay, but you can't feel how tight the bearings are. So I'm guessing what we do is just put this in here. I mean, if you go to YouTube, Ashcrofts have got a full video on there with a guy building a diff on the bench. He's got a load more backlash now just from turning it a few times. So what we'll do is we'll spin it a few times, and then we'll check the backlash again. Get the clock in there. And once again, we've got loads, so we're going to have to now loosen this side. As I said, yeah, if you go on YouTube, there is a fantastic video of how to do this. Quite why I'm doing this, I don't know, because their video is much better than mine. But okay, so that's 10 thou. That's about 9 thou. That's still about 9 thou, and we've gone a bit tight on the bearing, so we'll loosen this side a touch. God blimey. As I say, we're doing this is the first time I've ever done this. Okay, so that's 3.5 thou. We'll just knit this side up again. Okay, so there's 4 thou. Let's turn it a few times. What about wobbling? That's just the bench not being very strong. Yeah, we've got about 4.5 thou there now, so if I bring you in close, so you can see the clock, about 4.5 thou, so I'm happy with that. So I'm guessing that's it. Okay, so it's time to make up some of this paste that we're going to use to check the diff, and what I've got here is a drop of oil and some of this powder. Okay, now this powder, as I said earlier, it's aluminium oxide. We're just going to put a drop in there, nothing much, we don't need too much, you can see it's just a few little bits, we don't need loads of it. And as I said, I'm only going to do this quickly because I'm going to be stripping all this down again and fitting an Ashcroft diff. So we'll put a drop of oil in there, mix it all up, and you can see what we get is a very dense white. It's almost like a very thick white emulsion paint. But when I put it on there, you'll see that it's nothing like emulsion paint at all. It's actually very good. In the Land Rover manual we get this chart here. We can see you've got A, B, C, D, E, and this is showing the difference. And this is, if you look at A, okay, this one is showing you here, this is how it should be. So what we should see is this white area around the black mark as it's drawn here. So with that white paste, that stuff on there, what we should see is this. We've got an even distribution of pressure on both sides of the ring gear. And that's what we should see. If we see this, okay, it tells us on the other side what we should be looking at. So got backlash incorrect, thinner pinion shim required. So that means the pinion is too far into the crown wheel, too far this way into the crown wheel. And then we've got C, which is basically the opposite, so that's going to be a thicker pinion shim required. D is pinion shim incorrect, decreased backlash. So basically by moving, what we're going to do is by moving the pinion in and out. Okay, so by moving the pinion in and out, we can move the pattern up and down the tooth. And also by moving the backlash in and out, or moving the ring gear in and out, we increase the backlash if we go that way, we decrease the backlash if we come this way, and we can basically move the pattern around. And it's basically a case of playing with it. Now I've rebuilt my 4 GPW diffs and they are all shims, everything is shims, it's a bloody nightmare. And you know, you end up putting that together 4 or 5 times. So let's just put some of this stuff on here. Okay, so I'm just going to paint it on a couple of teeth. You can see now what I mean, how it stands out much better. Stands out much better than Engineer's Blue. And as I say, you can make this yourself. Just get a wire brush, get some corroded aluminium, and save the white powder. Or you can buy, I don't know where from, but you can buy aluminium oxide powder. I think I did this myself. I'm sure I did. Okay, so we've got an even covering on there now. And what we want to do, let's put that down. Now we're going to get the pinion, the ring gear, and we're going to turn it, and we're going to go like this, and go over the pinion. We're looking at both sides, and I'm going to do this as well. And we want to see the pattern. And what we can see here, if I bring you in, is, as luck would have it, it's bloody gorgeous. Okay, so what we can see, it's very, very even. Where are we? Over the area of the tooth here. And that's what we're looking for. And then if we look at the back of the teeth, you can see again, you can see the contact area is very even, centered around the tooth. If it runs off the edge, that's the bit you really don't want. That's when you get chipped teeth and whining and all sorts. So you can see now, see if I can get a better shot. You can see on there, it's really, really nice. It's centered around the tooth, which is what you want to see. Where are we? We're centered around here. We're not running off the ends. So that is absolutely perfect. I'm really happy. I'll show you something here, guys. What I've done, I've slackened this side and tightened this side slightly. Just like literally one of these divisions, if you like. And the backlash is now 6 thou. So I've gone from like 4.5 to 6 thou. And you can see the change in the pattern just by that tiny, tiny movement. We can see here that the area now is more centered, but there's a lot more pressure in this small area here. And on the back, it's pretty much the same. But we can see that having that smaller amount of that larger amount of backlash near the top limit has actually reduced the contact area. In fact, what I'll do now is I will wind it back in and see what happens. Okay, and there you go. I've literally wound that over, so it's about 4.5, maybe 5 thou now. So we're talking 2 thou difference in the backlash, and you can see what a difference it's made. How the area is now wider. You've still got this concentrated area of pressure here. You can see how much wider the area is. What you can do with this stuff is just brush it over again, just like so, if you just want to be double sure, and then you can go over. And then look, and just look at your pattern again. We can see we've got that lovely wide area. One of the other difficulties now is when you start to do this more and more, you start to deposit, as you can see down in there, you start to deposit this stuff onto the pinion, and the problem is then what you get is you're putting paste on top. Okay, so instead of just rubbing the paste off of here, you can see you can see where it's depositing the paste on the ring gear here. Okay, so you're sort of putting paste onto paste rather than just rubbing the old paste off. But I'm happy with that, so we're going to call that a wrap for this one. I think it's been quite a long video. Hope you've enjoyed it. Very soon we'll be coming back and getting some work done on this chassis, which is out there patiently waiting for some work next to the Mustang. And this Jess. And we'll get these diffs ordered. I'm also going to order up some shims, I think, because I'm not happy. I think this is a little bit too tight on this pinion. Not the actual. I'm happy with the positioning. It's the preload I'm not happy with. I think it's a little bit too tight. So that's been the story of this thing all the way through, hasn't it? Remember my transfer box, 3 thou of preload versus 13 thou. Yeah, and the mashed up centre pairing. Oh God, it's been a nightmare all the way through this. And people ask me, why do I take it apart? Yeah, well, now you know why. So I'll see you later in a minute, guys. So there we go then, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. Sorry about the lighting. It's all a bit, my bald head doesn't help, does it? So there we go. That's basically how we put a diff together, how we get some bushes out, and how we identify all the parts and keep them all together. Hope you enjoyed that. As I say, if you want to see this done a lot quicker, then go to the Ashcroft YouTube channel and you'll see them actually do a full build in a few minutes. Sorry about the lighting, the light goes in and out, it's this bloody old phone. But yeah, there we go. I've learnt a bit, I hope you've learnt a bit too. I will do another video on final assembly because when I get the Ashcroft diffs now, because there's a few bits and pieces I haven't done, which obviously you need to do when you're actually building it properly. So as I said, I'm going to get some new shims, get this preload a bit reduced on here. I don't like that, it's a bit too heavy I think. And then we'll put it together properly. I'm probably going to put an ATB diff in the front and a locker in the back. Now Ashcrofts are currently saying lockers are out of stock, but we'll see. I'll speak to them tomorrow and see where we go from here. But I'll let you know. And if you're wondering why I'm doing all this stuff, there's diffs and everything, instead of doing the chassis wax all and that, I want to get my living room back. It's full of stuff, Land Rover stuff, as I showed you before. So if you haven't seen that, go back 2 or 3 videos ago and you'll see I did your walkthrough of my house, and you can see that it's absolutely full of Land Rover parts. So there we are. So I'll see you all soon. Thanks for watching. As I say, hope you enjoyed it. Stay safe, do what your local government, whatever, tells you, and yeah, bye for now.